Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Taking deep breaths. How are you tonight?
It's a Monday, more ways than one.
It is. Well, first,
Gotta love it.
welcome back, everyone, to Beyond Nutrition Community Podcast, a space for slowing down, tuning in, and rebuilding your health from the inside out. We're your hosts, Sherri and Becky, two women who have been there. And when I tell you we've been there, we're there right now. What am I talking about? Well, are you overwhelmed, exhausted, disconnected from your own bodies? Well, we've lived that and we've moved through it. And we've rewritten our stories, not with quick fixes or pushing harder, but with slow, steady healing and a return to what's real. So we're here to walk with you as you learn to trust your body and honor nature's rhythms and create sustainable health in every part of your life. This is a place for honest conversations, which we're about to have with you, and gentle support, and a community that reminds you that you are not doing this alone. You're if you're craving calm, clarity, and a deeper connection to yourself, you have found your people and you are in the right place. So, where you want to start, Miss Becky?
Lordy, lordy. Welcome everyone. All right. So the topic tonight, I think Instagram. Yeah, okay, right. We're over there. Pivoting, right? Many of you probably seen that we were supposed to have a guest tonight, and we he had to end up in reschedule. So we will we will get that rescheduled. We will be live, and we are pivoting tonight. So sorry, Instagram's doing Instagram things. I'm really not sure what's going on over there, but anyway, um, we're pivoting.
We are. We
That's where
pivoted.
I'm at right now.
And that's literally so as I'm racing to change the podcast, right? The name of the podcast, because I wanted to take our guest off. And I thought, well, what better topic than pivoting when life throws you curveballs? Because we just had one thrown at us, right? So, but that's part of life.
It is. It is. And that's where when you end up and you create, right, a sustainable lifestyle. And that's why what we focus on is not just the day to day, right? We're looking at
Mhm.
how we're not looking at quote the diet, right? A diet is a start point and an end point, right? Dietary camps end up and we're looking at a lifestyle. And so how do we end up and create that in a day to day where when life throws you these curveballs, you don't just, throw caution to the wind and say the heck with it and let everything go, right? We could have ended up and easily tonight said, oh, our guest canceled, so we're not going to end up and do it,
Right.
right? But no, we pivoted, we transitioned. We may have been, 10 minutes late, but hey, we're here, right? So definitely give us those likes if you're following along, or even give us the comments, or if you have questions even. Maybe you're navigating your journey right now and it's throwing you some curveballs and you need some coaching guidance on how to navigate that. But one of the things that I tell my clients personally is, what can you do on those worst days, right? What can you do on your most stressful days? What is just the minimum that you can get in there as a non-negotiable? Maybe
Right.
that's, simply seeing sunrise. Maybe that's simply, taking your food with you, and that's the best that you can do, right?
Hmm.
So it is some of these small actionable items that end up and lead to the greater success, but it's also building that consistency. So when life does end up and throw crap at you, right? I've dealt with it, you've dealt with it, we still still deal with it, right? Um, which I think most people end up and do. So it's what can you end up and do that is going to set you on that trajectory, moving forward, to be sustainable.
Right. Well, curveballs. I can't even talk now, aren't interruptions. They're part of being a human, right? And most people think that they derail because they're not disciplined enough. And it really comes down to like a nervous system overload. It's not a lack of willpower.
Yeah. And and that's so funny because I literally just got off a coaching session and I said, that the nervous system, right? Sleep and the nervous system are two of the biggest things. I'm not out there chasing, ketones. I'm not out there chasing glucose numbers. I'm not out there chasing, different data biohacking metrics. Are they valuable? Yeah, they can be. But when I tell a client or, a community member to simply put their legs up a wall, an hour to 2 hours before bed, they look at me like I have two heads. Like that's too simple, right? What are you talking about? Legs up the wall, and that's supposed to help my parasympathetic? Yeah, it does, right? Or sitting in front of your red light doing, some box breathing, and they think that's, again, they think that's too simple. Yes, is it a biohack? Sure. Go sit outside, right? I was outside this afternoon, um, I don't know, for maybe an hour. And, just that simple practice. And I was barefoot, I was grounding, right? I sat on the steps of my deck. It wasn't anything fancy. It didn't have to be. It was just recharging my body with the natural electrons of the earth, with the natural sunlight. Yes, my UVB window was still open. I was producing that vitamin D. It wasn't like it was, midday, right? It wasn't
Right.
like I was getting, the highest UV index, but I still got it, right? I was still making it. We're only in, middle of April.
Hmm.
So being able to come out of winter, starting to build up that solar callus, getting that time frame, right? And it's those small things that you would be thankful for that you started now versus
Hmm.
waiting until summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I did red light before the podcast tonight too. I was, well, I got a new red light, so I was testing it out, but I was using it. So that was, you know, probably why I'm so calm with this curveball. But seriously though, when unpredictability hits, the first thing is the brain goes into this threat detector, right? And it goes in, it initiates like this survival mode. And survival mode goes top notch at that point over logical thoughts, right? It triggers your stress hormones. And Becky and I talk about stress hormones. Let's give them a quick recap on what are stress hormones.
Cortisol.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you are more cortisol dominant, um, it can affect a lot of the other processes, right? Once you end up and you hit the survival aspect, the body, the thyroid, the adrenals, you a
Hmm.
lot of your a lot of your hormones. Speaking of curveballs, it's telling me that my power is not plugged in. There we go. Um, well, welcome to real life, your friends. All of a sudden it's like energy saver. I'm like, yeah, well, power must not be on. Anyway, back to survival mode because we're gonna survive this tonight, right? The metabolism. So the cortisol runs the show for the metabolism, and the body starts perceiving the stress. Doesn't matter whether it's physical, emotional, nutritional, maybe even fasting, right? Fasting is a stressor. Ketosis is a stressor. So it shifts the body into this survival mode and this conservation mode. And that's where, again, the body is producing the sugar that it needs basically off of the cortisol, the stress hormones, right? So we're supposed to have cortisol. It's not that cortisol is a bad thing. We just want it to have this natural rise in the morning. That's what wakes us up, right? It's what metabolizes the energy. It helps you respond to stress. But when it's chronically elevated, this is where we start to see the dawn effect, the dawn phenomenon. But this is also where the body becomes dysregulated. You start to have thyroid issues. You start to have adrenal fatigue. You start to end up and get wired but tired. Maybe you're someone that wakes up at 3, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. You start to end up and have cravings. Cortisol can end up and lead to, you know, cravings in the middle of the afternoon. You can be very anxious or, on edge when you are too high in cortisol as well. But the biggest thing that a lot of people end up and realize with cortisol is weight goes up. So when your cortisol is chronically elevated, fat loss will stall. You will not have weight loss. You will have a lot of abdominal fat. So that visceral fat, an unhealthy fat especially, is going to end up and be triggered, and you will start gaining weight in your midsection. So it's not that it is a lack of discipline that has created an issue, but it is more that you are running on a stressed out nervous system. And I get it, right? I understand. I was there. I'm like, oh, I have the perfect diet. I have, I'm adding, foods, and I'm eating circadian friendly, and I'm doing all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I had this conversation this morning. What is the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing that I have changed?
Yeah.
Stress and nervous system.
Yep.
Not saying that I don't have stress in my life, but what has led to the 53-pound difference? Nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Managing my nervous system, managing how and what I do and how I connect that, and hydration, which dehydration, again, can lead to stress of the body. Those are the
Absolutely.
two biggest things, and so when you create this safety, when you get the body out of that survival mode, it no longer feels like it needs to hold on to that energy storage, right? That conservation mode. It no longer has a disrupted thyroid function. It's no longer, breaking down the muscle for energy, right? Creating that gluconeogenesis. And that's one of the biggest things when I have my Hume scale that I've been monitoring is my
Mm-hmm.
lean muscle mass. To me, it's not just about the fat loss. It was about how can I end up and shape that body composition. And that's part of and I did also end up and have my, some lab work done, and um, the hormones, right? We know that the body has an ability to produce secondary hormones that we need. And to have them in, a level that I do after having a complete hysterectomy and not take an HRT tells me that my adrenals and my thyroid, yes, I did have thyroid levels done too, but it also tells me that my body is back to being able to optimize and be out of that and produce what it needs fully, not just, function.
So I'm going to throw something really nerdy and technical out that
Mm-hmm.
I find interesting, right? So we have the, I'm going to mispronounce it. So the amygdala. And it didn't say it right. But anyway, what is it? Well, it's a small almond shaped set of neurons located deep within the brain's temporal lobes. It's important to know what this is because this is what's actually firing off when that threat happens, right? That stress. And so it triggers, as we just talked about, those hormones, those stress hormones, the adrenals and the cortisol. But if that is how you're reacting, how can you kind of mitigate that, right? How can we slow that down? Well, it actually, believe it or not, takes about 6 to 10 seconds for your entire nervous system to change. That's it. So if you are keenly aware of what's happening, you can do breathing, deep breathing. We talk about breathing. Becky and I breathe, and we're not just talking about normal breathing. We're talking about the box breathing or whatever breathing we have. Had many meetings within the BNC community for breath work. It is very vitally important to know how to breathe and to help de-escalate that alarm going off in your head. Any tips around that, Becky?
Well, and I think one of the key pieces that many of people miss is your body doesn't end up and know the difference, right?
Right.
So when you're talking about the amygdala and the signals, it doesn't know if a tiger is chasing you, if you're chronically dieting, maybe you're overtraining, emotional stress, lack of sleep can end up, all of those are going to end up and activate this stress response. And so any time that you can bring the body back into that, and that's where, calming it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
morning sunlight, right? One of the easy, most actionable steps, because that tells the brain we are safe. It is a new day and you can slowly start your process, right? When you kick on indoor lights and you get that brightness or that lux of light first thing in the morning, the body ends up and starts firing away because it thinks that it's midday. Where if the first light that your eyes see is going to end up and be that morning sunlight or low lux of light, right? So I get it a lot of times where people are like, but I have to be up before sunrise or up before daybreak. Okay, see a low lux red light, see a salt lamp, something that is very low lux, like below 10, as you are getting ready, you can also end up and go out and do the grounding, because the grounding, and again, that energy shift is going to end up and help with the clearing of that melatonin and then slowing down your meals. A lot of people end up and rush. And that is one of the things that I end up and I tell clients all the time. Sit there, put your hands on your lap, and do a couple rounds of box breathing. What do I mean? Breathe in, hold, exhale. Breathe in through the nose, hold, exhale through the mouth. You can simply do that even if you're sitting in a workspace office room, break room. No one is going to end up and look at you funny if you're sitting there, doing a couple rounds of those. That down regulates that stress response. It also improves digestion and creates this safety around that meal. It helps with, no matter whether you're having protein, fats, carbs, it helps with that digestion. So, consistent routine also, that is one of the other sides in creating the safety. The body likes consistency. Predictability creates safety. So the more consistent you can end up and be with a routine, and this is why I tell people, typically be, in bed and out of bed within an hour. I don't care if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or if it's a Saturday, Sunday. Be in and out of bed within an hour of each other. So say you normally end up and go to bed at 9:30. Make sure you're in bed no later than 10:30, right? No different than even myself. I use that too. Normally I'm in bed by 10. My daughter has to work some nights, so it's 10:30, right? Sometimes quarter to 11. Depends what time she gets off work, but normally I am also out of bed around, 6 or so in the morning. My body naturally starts to wind down.
Uh-huh.
It gets to that point where even like we had friends here this last weekend, and I'm like, yep, it's, it's time for bed. They're not saying that there's not nights that, I do have to end up and be up beyond that, for whatever reason, but, um, that consistent routine, right? Not over restricting food. That is one of the other biggest things
Yes.
to help calm that amygdala and practical aspect. Too many people either over restrict, and by that I mean food groups, but also food in general. Like
Uh-huh.
they're under eating. I see it all the time. And that again creates this threat to the body where if you are eating enough, right, protein is the anchor. We need the amino acids, we need the protein, but you've got to have a fuel source. And too many people are underfueling the body and they're stuck, or they're feeling like crap, or they're, just really not seeing the progress that they're after because the body is conserving.
Yeah.
So, reducing those threat signals is going to end up in B. The last and final tip or suggestion is one of the hardest that I've seen not only in clients, but also in a lot of challenges that we do with the BNC community. And that's getting off screens at night. That is the hardest for people,
Yep.
is to get off those screens at least just an hour before bed.
I know we had one member that said people were still calling or no texting, wasn't it?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and it was like he didn't realize how hard that was.
Yep.
Yeah.
So putting that phone down, and getting off those screens does protect the nervous system, because no matter whether you're, getting the dopamine hit of mindlessly scrolling, right? Getting sucked
Right.
into TikTok or Facebook Reels or Instagram Reels, or, whatever the case may be, right? Getting sucked into that, the body and the mindset end up and need the signal to wind down.
Yeah. Well, and something too is you can remember the 4 R's, right? Recognize, relax, reframe, and respond. I was, this has been a little bit, but I was on a couple months ago, one of my clients, and she got some anxiety going on, and I had her do the orienting response, right? I had her looking around her room and naming items. And it sounded silly, right? Because like it's like light, door, window, I mean, it was
Mhm.
floor, and it actually what it's doing is it's telling your brain that you're safe, and it kind of brings you back, right? And then at that point, once we got her relaxed, then we could continue on. We did some breathing. She had me count breathing with her. And so, and also shift kind of that language, right? Instead of why is this happening to me? Why am I always it's what does this moment need from me? Right. And this has taken me quite a while to learn this myself. I can honestly tell you this little curveball and being 10 minutes late to start the podcast tonight, I can say that I did not feel the stress, and I'm actually kind of proud of myself, right?
Mhm. That's a
That
big shift.
it was a very big shift, right? Because, well, and I actually was trying to call Becky to let her know what was going on, and I knew she was thinking, "Oh, Sherri's panicking," because she was running a little behind too. So, and it wasn't, but it's just interesting that I've been working on this for well over what 2 years now,
Mhm.
and so that's huge. But I love when Becky says, "What can you do on your worst day?" And that is a big key, right? The non negotiables: sleep, protein, hydration, movement. What are those non negotiables for you? For me, my bedtime. Like, I don't play with my bedtime unless I'm somewhere very rare, right? But Um, so I'm flexible there. It doesn't happen too often. We've been on meetings where the meetings have gone later, and I'm like,
Mhm.
see ya. I'm heading down to bed, like I'm shutting down. So when life hits, what is the one thing you can do? And then you have to look at we always say good, better, best, right?
Mhm.
So the good enough protocol. You got ideas on that one, Becky?
That's where, I mean, the good enough, right, is okay, if you do have to end up and be on your phone, maybe it's for work or whatever, right? Wearing the blue blockers, right? We're on the computers. My screen's red. I know, once the sun sets, you got your blue blockers there, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's the good, right? The best obviously is to end up and be off of the devices. Um, it's really, when we look at good, better, best scenario, it's a case of where are you at, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to pivot, but that doesn't mean that you're quitting. It just means that, you're listening, you're recognizing, and we need to end up and do better tomorrow, right? So, if food is your area that you need to end up and pivot on, make that one better meal tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? Make it your breakfast. Maybe you're someone that doesn't eat breakfast within an hour of being up. Make that the one, thing that you are doing better. If the
Yeah.
rest of the day falls apart, well, guess what? You started out, building that, right?
Right.
Um, maybe movement, right? I've structured mine into, I when we were talking this morning, and you're like, well, what have
Mm-hmm.
I labeled it imperfect workout because I shoot for 3 days a week. Do I do it, all 3 days? No. I start out my week, right, on a Monday, really good. But, so that's kind of my thing too, is I will start the week, but things kind of happen, right? Like last Friday, we had friends in town. I didn't get the workout done, but I didn't beat myself up or, not enjoy life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
you know uh, so it's learning to be able to transition but still push through sustainably.
Right, right. One of the things that I have recently realized was, and it's okay to acknowledge, right? Oh my gosh, that was a lot. And I had somebody ask me, think back over the last 3 years, and I wrote it out. It was kind of an interesting exercise, but I wrote out the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, I got my house ready, put it on the market, sold it, bought a camper, moved 6 hours, and lived in a camper, which I'm still living in one, bought acreage in the middle of nowhere, raw land that the nearest electric was a mile away, right? And I went through this whole exercise and it was like, oh my goodness, that was a lot. And here I am. So it was reframing and acknowledging that without the judgment, right? Because I've been very hard on myself the past 3 years. This is it's not moving quick enough. Let's do this, right? Let's do that. So also recognizing a real need, right?
Mhm.
Is it rest that you need? Is it support that you need? Then is it clarity or is it boundaries? And sitting in silence, you can kind of doodle this out. Becky and I both journal. So I know she's laughing. We actually have an affirmations journal that we've created because it helped us. Then we thought, well, let's do that for everyone else. Ooh, anything you want to tag onto that? She's going to point her
No,
finger at me in a
I
minute,
was
but that's okay.
well, no, I wasn't sure if you ended up a froze there for a second.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was mine, but you know again, it's going back to those ways of reducing stress signals, right? Building that foundation, starting small. Those small shifts are going what is going to end up and shift your system. So whether it's the journaling, and I get it, right? There's people are like, well, what do I end up and I journal about? And that's where there's prompts, you know. If writing isn't your thing, create voice notes. Told someone else to end up, even if you're in the car, maybe it's when you're in the
Yeah.
shower,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. A lot of phones now seem to, be able to set it outside the shower, turn your voice notes on, and just simply talk. I can't tell you how many how many posts on my Instagram over there. Sorry, Instagram friends, were thought in the shower. I would be in the shower and I'm like, that is something that people don't think of, and so I would end up and make a note about it, right? But a lot of the basics, right? Going back to that good, better, best and how to reduce those signals, getting outside, eating consistently, stop skipping meals, right? Because when you skip meals, the body is stressed. Begin with just dimming the lights. You don't have to switch to red lights. You don't have to buy the salt lamps.
No.
Yes, I have salt lamps, but just simply start by shutting lights off, right? And like you said, go to bed at, a consistent time. Then you can move into, supporting the system and getting better with, once the body kind of starts to settle and now we give it those stronger, clear signals, right? Front load the protein, making sure that you're getting, at least that 30 grams of protein. Add that movement in. It can just simply be a walk after a meal. You don't need the intensity. It can be body weight. Say you're standing at the sink doing dishes, do some calf raises, do some counter supported squats, hang onto your kitchen sink and squat down, right? Doesn't have to be, I created a whole beginner circuit program as part of my, coaching program because just the basic movements, people don't utilize it enough to uptake the glucose, to support the stress side. They try to end up overtraining and they end up and burn themselves out. So for many people, bringing those carbs back in strategically if you've been chronically low carb, but really building that repeatable daily rhythm that you are able to stick with.
Absolutely. So that fight or flight, right? Let me ask you a question. So, what is one tool sitting where you're at today that you had known 10 years ago?
What is one tool?
Yeah, not necessarily something you bought, right? But something you use, a tip that, oh my goodness, had I known that 10 years ago.
Stress. Um, and I say it that way, but honestly, because if I look back 10 years ago, because even at 10 years ago, I would have already had my hysterectomy done. So, you would have to go like 20 years ago to get
Okay.
before that, because I was 29 when I ended up and had that done. So if I had known then what I know now, things might have been a little bit different in regards of, precancerous cells and family history of cancer and what causes cancer and everything that I know on that realm. But a lot of things also I feel changed after that. There were things before that. Like I supposedly had my heart issues and all my cardiac issues and asthma issues before that, because I can remember doing stress tests before I ever had my hysterectomy. If I would have known the basics. So what is one tool? The basic foundations. If I would have known them then, it would have changed a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't probably have needed to been on 7 different pharmaceutical medications if I would have just worked on some of these basic things, that we end up when we coach about. Because once I did work on them, I've been able to come off of it. So I don't know that there's just one thing other than, like I said, just the basics, really anchoring into those
Yeah,
basics. And it doesn't have to be, perfect. That's the big thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just building and reinforcing.
right. Right. I think
How about you?
sunlight, yeah, sunlight for sure. Right. I didn't know I was the famous, how many pairs of sunglasses do I own? Um, Protein. I never knew that a protein was an important part of macros. Um, uh, and don't go crazy with all of that. I learned that the hard way, right? Breath work, sleep. And you know what's going to surprise you? Community. Community, and having that support system um, is huge, right? To bounce things off of people. We had on our meeting, our noon social today. I know somebody said, "How do I repay you?" And we said, "Show up.
Hmm.
You show up to the meetings. That's what community is for. It's huge, right? So those are like the things I wish I would have known. I mean, I know you remember what 4 years ago when I first got my blue blockers, and literally, I felt my body release enough to go to sleep. Like it was a physical feeling. It was pretty wild. Um, so yeah, and two, right? Like I don't know, 20 years ago, I was diagnosed as a rheumatoid arthritis. And I never quite believed it, but I identified as it. And then when I started down the healing journey, that was a misdiagnosis, right? It was learning about all the things that we just kind of the layers of things on how to reduce, right, the fatigue and automate what you can and simplify what you can and delegate what you can. It's things like that you know you have to remember that curveballs don't define you. Your recovery of those curveballs actually do, right? There was a time where I would have ate myself anything and everything in the house, right? I would have just, that's how I would have dealt with it at one time. Um, the need to be perfect, you don't. You just need to be present. Um, your nervous system is not your enemy, it's your compass. And it's telling you what it needs. And that's where I think you and I both see people push harder.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And that's where, it can, you hit a good point. And that's where, when you are, sorry, my eyeball itches. When with people identifying as their
Mm,
diagnosis, right? That is a big topic, right? And when people over identify, it can lead to a healthcare, like basically OCD. And when people are stuck in this frame, right? And it's not, I had, right? It's I am,
mm-hmm,
and that's how they end up. And then they're just on this loop of, identifying with diagnosis. It's not the same as, a hypochondriac, that ends up and just simply thinks that they end up and they have everything, but
mm-hmm,
is that actually turned into a stress side of it, right? That is identifying and a hyper focus, right? It almost feels like it's impossible to shut off, where it turns into people start paying over attention to their health, right? It's a constant checking symptoms. It's, you know meticulous, right? Over analyzing every sensation, every minute detail, um googling or AIing, everything that goes
yeah,
on, right? I feel this, or I did this, or I have this, or I, and they're throwing it in there, right? So that is very different than a community and bouncing off, right? That's where I think people need to kind of decipher with the difference in connection of something, that is just, computer based, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Actually having that human connection. Okay, maybe it's not in real life, right? We don't go to meetings anymore for, and I say that because I used to manage and help run a local, Weight Watcher meeting. We would meet every week. We would do the check-in. We would sit in, have a whole presentation, right? Um, so that's what I mean by in person. Do some people need it? Maybe. But right now, thanks to, 6 years ago, a lot of people have been very familiar with being able to log into Zoom, being able to log into Google Meets, and we meet as a community. We hear the voices, we hear that, personality of all the individuals, right? So there it is something different when you end up and are able to connect that and the brain is able to hear that. Um, it gets you out of that heightened alert state of your own health symptoms, and it breaks that loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I mean, when you start to identify with the physical signs like your increased heart rate, sweating, um, tightening in the chest or the throat, mine is always in the shoulders, right? Flushed face or neck, tunnel vision, swallowing, rapid breathing, muscle tension. No, that's me. And then start listening to yourself when you're hearing always and never, right? Becky has heard me say those words many times, right? I'm never going to heal, right? But those are things that you kind of know what's going on, what is happening and why. Um, Identify that. And then we've given you some tips tonight on, like I said, start naming objects. Becky said box breathing. What else did you say to do?
legs up the wall is
Yep,
another one.
yep. Um, and then when it's kindly over, right, and you're relaxed, if you think back and look at it objectively and go, what triggered that, right? Um, what was my body telling me that was happening? And then what was actually happening, right? Because we have a perceived sense and we have an actual what is going on. And then think about what you could have done differently had you not been in that fight or flight mode. And then give yourself permission, that one thing to prepare for when life throws you that curveball, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? Journal prompts, we've talked about that. I know one thing that we didn't talk about, Becky, was the our touch points that we both have, and Coach
Mm.
Sly has our touch points. You have them. Now, this is something that all three of us
Yeah, I have
coaches have
well, there's the other
purchased.
one.
Okay.
I was like, I just have the, I don't have the bands on them. The bands are behind me. So they do come with bands that like here's it's a watch band. But
Hmm.
they end up you can they're dead. But anyway, they have buttons. They end up and they send a pulse or a vibration, um, stagger it. So it does end up in help. I have them off the bands because I'll end up and I'll hold them in my hands or I'll stick them in
Hmm.
my pockets. Or,
Hmm.
I wear leggings right now because our weather is like all over the place. And I'll stick them in the cuff of my, leggings and have it like alternating on my ankles. So I mean that's how I end up and use them, but you can end up and wear them like watches actually on your wrists. I think I posted a video not too terribly or a photo not too terribly long ago on Instagram wearing them. So it does truly end up in help. You can again stack that with other things, right?
Yeah.
Wear them, focus on your breathing, focus on sitting in front of a red light, anything like that that is going to help with calming of the body and supporting the mitochondria too.
I love that. Well, this was real life tonight. We got thrown a curveball. And we just kind of dealt with it. And I know I wasn't stressed over it. I was more just trying to get hold of you to let you know what had happened and that I was switching gears on you to create another link to our podcast tonight on the fly. I didn't want you clicking on the wrong thing, but yeah. Any other? Does anybody have questions? Do you have anything out
Mm,
there?
Not really. I mean, the biggest thing is, you don't just calm your body by watching it very closely. You end up and you calm it by giving it the signals and creating that safety. So, stop searching for the problems and start supporting just the basic signals. And a lot of those problems, that you seem to end up and be chasing a fix for, start to end up and fall into place. And sometimes we have to make a pivot. Sometimes we end up and we have to, move away, right? I've had clients, like I said, that were tracking, blood sugar and ketones, and I'm like, why, what is your reason for tracking those? So sometimes it's, we get stuck in our natural rhythm of what we're doing that we may not even know, why we're doing something, right? Until someone ends up and confronts us with that aspect. And so that again, also, right? That's where even new people coming into a community can be beneficial because it kind of makes us stop and think of our journey. And sometimes we do evolve, right? We both evolved out of carnivore, we've evolved out of keto. So it's not always about food, it's not always about just the workout side of things, but it's learning to step into your own journey and get out of that loop of someone else's recommendations. It's
Yeah,
great to end up and have that coach to end up and support you as a individual based on an individual method, not just throw a blanket approach at you.
absolutely. Well, if tonight um, kind of resonated with you, right? Or you know someone that could benefit from hearing our conversation, we would love for you to share this podcast. Definitely like and subscribe so you know when when we switch gears and we have to, go another
Pivot.
angle at the pivot at the last minute, right? Um, but we our guest was Dr. Bill Schindler, who he had to pivot, right, and reschedule. So we'll get that set back up. But we do thank you for showing up and tuning in, and we do read your comments. We love to see those, and um, we'll be back Monday night. Yep, next Monday night. We do this live, folks. That's why a lot of times when we start this up, we're laughing hysterically because first of all, I don't know who between the two of us decided let's do this on a Monday night. Number two, let's do it live, like unscripted and not. Yeah, we do that. Um, so we kind of get what we get, right? And I guess that's kind of what makes it real, at least to
That's
us.
right.
We don't have the lights and the setup and the big honking microphones, and we're not sponsored by a bunch of people, but we're just two women. We're here.
Yep, we are. And sometimes it's a life. We'll just end up and say that. But we do appreciate you for tuning in. We appreciate you folks that tune in on the Tuesday when we are streaming to all the audio only versions. We do end up and read the comments. We really do appreciate it. So tune in next week. Audio, give us a like on the platform. And if there's ever a topic or questions that you guys have, make sure you end up and share that on any of the platforms. So we appreciate you. Have a